Little weird theater here. I'm just going to give everybody a minute or two to settle in. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. All right. So my name is Sara Boilen. I am a SheJumps board member, and I'm also a clinical psychologist up here in Northwest Montana. And in my free time, I spend some time playing in the mountains. And I also do some teaching in the Avalanche education world, specifically around communication and decision making and behavioral economics. And so I'm particularly delighted to be hosting this panel tonight. So thank you all for joining. And I see the numbers are still climbing, but we're just going to dive right in. Before we dive in and introduce our panelists, I just want to set the frame a little bit for what we're talking about here tonight. So anybody who's ever skied in the backcountry or taken an avalanche education course, not through SheJumps, perhaps, you have probably noticed that the field is pretty heavily male dominated. And there's actually some new research that's come out that's shown just how few women are in this field. And so we have been fortunate enough tonight to assemble some of the most amazing women in the field to talk to you all as sort of like a combination informational and inspirational event for those of you who are looking to break into the field, for those of you who are struggling in the field, or for those of you who are just psyched and really excited to hear from other women having similar experiences. You know, I feel like there's a pretty strong myth amongst women. I feel like it's dissipating over the years, but the myth is sort of like that there's not enough room at the top. And having stood on a mountaintop actually with Nikki, who we're going to hear from in a little while, and lots of other wonderful women, I can say there is plenty of room at the top. And I think that is a myth that we're going to have to continually try to deconstruct and do away with and fight off. Because whether the top is like a boardroom or like the top of, you know, Mount Rainier, there is plenty of room. And so I'm delighted to see we have like almost 80 people here tonight, and there's room for all of us. And so I hope that's what you walk away with. So I am going to have each panelist kind of introduce themselves and just tell us a little bit about their current role in avalanche education and their history as to how they got there. And then we're going to engage in some dialogue around a few important topics. And then at the end, we're going to have a Q&A. So our wonderful executive director, Claire, is monitoring the chat, as will the panelists throughout the time. So if you have a question, you can pop it in there. If it's something specific for Liz, you know, or Brooke, they might be able to answer it as we go, or perhaps it's something we'll address at the end. So feel free to chime in. And let's start with Nikki. Why don't you introduce yourself?
All right, I'm Nikki Champion. I am a forecaster in Utah for the Utah Avalanche Center for the Salt Lake, Provo, and Ogden area mountains. As well, I run all the women's specific education for Salt Lake. Previously, Evelyn was here before I got here, and she did all the women's education, partnered with SheJumps. This year, we went from 3 courses to 7. So we're just growing our women's education, which is really exciting. I did one this morning. In the summers, Sara talked about it a little bit. I work as a guide for RMI, primarily based in the Pacific Northwest. I guide ski mountaineering, climbing, and just general mountaineering education. Before that, I was lucky enough to be up in Alaska and work with a lot of these wonderful women. And then I did education and snow science in Bozeman for 5 years before that. So excited to be on here, excited to see some familiar faces again. So.
Thank you so much, Nikki. All right, Brooke.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brooke Edwards, and I'm currently the staffing director at the Alaska Avalanche School. and I still am an instructor there for all the different course types that we offer, which I love doing. And then winter time, I also double as a ski guide when I can. And for 25 years now, I've been a wilderness guide. So that's, I've kind of always interplayed with guiding and educating in my life, and wilderness guiding in the summers in Alaska, but also I've had some other opportunities around the world. And I love how being an Avalanche educator really kind of enabled me to work towards my ski guiding, and the ski guiding enables me to be a better Avalanche educator. So there's a lot of interplay between the education and guiding world, as Nikki mentioned as well. So I'm really honored to be here on this panel tonight. So thanks for asking me.
Awesome, thanks so much. And Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Riggs-Meter. I'm the rec program director for ARI, so I'm responsible for all the rec curriculum and education and training of instructors at ARI. I have a more circuitous background. I was originally worked as an engineer, got into education, had the time and space to take a bunch of time off. I worked as a NOLS instructor, as a ski patroller, as a very part-time guide on Mount Rainier as well. So I got to dabble in a lot of things, and then kind of bring that all back together under the umbrella of Avalanche education. And so that's sort of what I do now, is like bring a very shallow familiarity with a lot of things, and then kind of wrap that up with my engineer's brain that views design and education design, and I try to bring that sort of philosophy and sensibility to ARI. So, and then did I say I'm in Seattle, Washington? I have a small child, so that, although she's not that small anymore, and that is like takes up a lot of my time, especially now where we're all in one small house together. So yeah, spend a lot of time skiing when I can. Thanks,
Liz. Melis, we'd love to hear from you next.
Hi, I'm lucky enough to work with Brooke, but I'm executive director of Alaska Avalanche School and had been working for a long time as a high altitude mountaineering guide. I was a federale, a climbing ranger with the National Park Service in Denali Park. And in my current role, it was exciting for me to kind of take on a more programmatic look of community safety and learn how I can kind of sculpt safety on a big scale instead of just being this on the ground responder to this one climbing team with a problem. And so that's been really engaging and exciting for me. But I look forward to hearing everybody's stories tonight. So thanks for welcoming me.
And Betsy.
Hi, I'm Betsy Monero. I'm a ski guide and area instructor based out of Driggs, Idaho. I work mostly in Grand Teton National Park, but also a little in the Salt Lake area, a little out in Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado, and I'm also the associate editor of Backcountry Magazine. I got into Avalanche education kind of I started backcountry skiing when I was like 11 years old with my dad and started doing it by myself when I was a teenager. Had a lot of near misses on Mount Washington after I got my driver's license and could go by myself because I had no idea what I was doing. Finally took an ARI course when I was 18, and that was like pretty life-changing. And so, yeah, I kind of just devoted my life to getting more certifications and then passing that on to other people. Yeah.
Wow, what an all-star crew. So thank you all for taking the time to be with us tonight. So let's start, Liz, you actually sort of referenced this in your introduction. So many of you, like Betsy, right, you've been doing this a long time, you kind of like worked your way up. And I feel curious as somebody who, I got my doctorate when I was 31, so like a little late to the game, kind of non-traditional in some ways, although I felt really young at the time, still do. But so for folks who haven't taken a linear kind of approach to getting into avalanche education, maybe they're a little older, or this is a second kind of career, or just something they've stumbled along. Liz, what advice would you give to folks in that position?
Yeah, I've like prepped you with, I'm not a linear talker either. Like my life isn't linear, and I like have been told that I talk like around things and take a long time to get there. So I'm going to try to not do that. But I think that where we've come with like women, we were sort of talking about how there's like lots of room at the top, like we should view it like this instead of like this. And what comes with viewing it like that then is also an increase in like not just gender diversity, but like diversity of the way people bring their experience. And so it's taken me a long time to get here. Like I really think when you cross over the 40, like maybe you're out of F's to give, is what a very astute climbing ranger on Rainier told me. He was like, when you pass 40, it's the magic place where you kind of stop caring. And it's a little bit, I think that's what it took. It was like, oh, I do have real life experience that's valuable here. And my like quirky, weird way of not being linear and not, and thinking that everything is connected is actually serving me well. It took me a while, and I had a lot of, I think, experiences where I was like, I don't belong here, you know, especially because I was like always sort of new and at the bottom of the ladder, like as a patroller and as a NOLS instructor and as a guide, I was always like just learning the ropes. And then at some point, I like just like having that tenacity, like people can't tell me I don't belong here. So there's that like first wave that you stick with, and that's like what I think all these women here probably can speak to, of being that first wave of women that come through and you're like, I belong. I don't care what you say, like I belong. And now what there's more room for, okay, here's where I'm gonna get to my point. The room with the like that broad at the top is like different ways for different people to be there. So somebody with like a kind of weird, quirky background like me can come in and say like, this is all valuable and I have something to contribute here. And we need that diversity of like thinking and experience. And so it's really like, and that's when you really make space for not just women, but like all types of diversity, like different racial and socioeconomic experiences, that like, that's when we move away from the gender binary and we just like, are like, yeah, we're all like beautiful, competent human beings that have a lot to contribute. So, but it was hard. I think it really did sort of take like hitting middle age a little bit and like not caring enough to say like, yeah, you're like putting me down probably because you're threatened, which is, this is like the most confidently I will ever be able to say that, but that's probably what's going on. And so I think that your question was advice, and a lot of it is just sticking through and like finding people who really shine a light on like the value you bring. And I'm always about like highlight your value, because that's like my feedback is always like highlight the positive, because that's the thing that you're going to contribute. So that's like my piece of advice is just like everybody has inherent value, even if it isn't always like clear how all those things are connected. And so like if this is your thing, this is your passion, like find the way where those things all connect. And it's okay that it's like sometimes you're circling around it and like coming in from the side. It'll work out.
That is, it's such a great reframe, right? Like, so if we switch it from this to this, suddenly it's a broader, you know, it's like a plateau, right? And there's a lot of space. And in that open space, all sorts of folks can be there. And if it's just this, right, it can only be the person who's always been doing it and, you know, has the money and the resources and the time and the energy and the looks, right? Like all of that. And I think some of us we've fallen for that myth. And so we've kind of been like, oh, I guess I won't really try. Brooke, I would love for you to jump in as well, because you sort of shared a similar thought.
And I feel like, I like Liz as well. I think it fits in with this. I really am loving this kind of visual as well, because within that too, Liz, what resonated with me is that I think if you looked at my resume, yeah, same thing. It's like it's like an abstract thinker like puked a bunch of outdoor jobs onto the page, you know. And I'm 49, I think now, 49, and I think what I've noticed in mentoring younger women is there's a lot of panic in this feeling of like, I need to figure out what I want to be and what are the steps I need to take to get there. And all I knew was that like, I really loved being outside and I really loved the experience. And if anything, it was like the people that were shaping that. And I really looked up to NOLS instructors. So I took a NOLS course and I became a NOLS instructor, and that introduced me to other people. And then I like met people who were doing snow stuff and I didn't know anything about that. And so then that fueled that trajectory. And so it really was this like, you know, I think of that as like now add a 3D sphere with that. So you're like being inspired by other people and taking jobs. And before I knew it, I woke up and did have a ton of experience and did have a lot of value in the field, and was able to be in a position just as a person in the ski community who'd worked a bunch of jobs, where one of my forecaster friends, Heather Tham, at the time said, I think you'd be really great a teacher at the Avalanche school. And I was like, I don't know enough, like there's no way. And it was just like those kind of people planting seeds and then just going for it and being like, I didn't have a goal to be an Avalanche educator. I didn't have a goal to be the staffing director. I've never been objective driven or goal driven in that way. I'm more like experience wowed and like amazed by like, well, if it involves great people and being outdoors, like sure, I'll jump in. And that, I think I just wanted to offer that to people maybe on the younger spectrum who are like feeling that panic and of uncertainty of like, well, I don't know what it is yet. Like nothing is speaking to me. And it's like, that's okay. Like go with what your heart grabs onto for the next best thing. And if that's a 3-month seasonal job, like you're going to gain miles of experience with that and meet really cool people who are going to plant seeds to open the next door. So
that's awesome. I really appreciate that. So both of you kind of referenced this. So there's two kind of bookmarks in my mind. One is mentorship, and we're definitely going to get there. But the other is that like really nasty lurking monster. And I don't mean like a, you know, persistent weak layer, right? But the like imposter syndrome, right? Of like that feeling of like, I don't belong in this room. I don't belong on this panel. Like if people really knew, they would like call in my replacement. And so I'd love for anybody on the panel who wants to chime in about your struggles with imposter syndrome and maybe how you've conquered it, or we can just commiserate if you're just totally still in the middle of it.
Well, I can speak a little to that. I read something in the New York Times, and it was about, you know, how women just at a very early age are so hard on themselves, and you're taught that being a good student is taking really clear notes and having 10 different highlighters, and each note's in a different color, and just how being a good student doesn't necessarily translate into being a good professional or successful professional, and how that tapers, and how do you know, let great get in the way of good enough. And now having had this, you know, extensive career of working with men and seeing what they consider good enough is I can just like fully say women are consistently way too hard on themselves. And I don't know if that's called imposter syndrome, but I think it's just this like inbred overwork ethic. And even getting ready for this panel, quite honestly, Sarah, you sent us like 26 college essay questions, and we had to do a bio. And I'm like, that still exists within this panel and preparing for this presentation tonight. And you will not see that, you know, often with your male colleagues. And so we have to just take it easy on ourselves and each other. And, you know, now as an employer or in a position of leadership, to just understand that, like, am I inherently harder on female employees? You know, that's something I really have to check myself on and be careful with. And, you know, are they accelerating through the organization at the same speed as men? And sometimes you have to like sit down and quantify it and make sure that's happening.
This is where the rest of you chime in. Go for it.
Well, I loved when Melis sent me that article in New York Times. I mean, I feel like I could talk for hours on imposter syndrome. I haven't figured out how to conquer it all, but it is something that I acknowledge now. I guess acknowledging it is the first step, and then share it in conversation with other women. And so Melis knows that I struggle with this, and so when she sent me that article, it made so much sense to me, because also in the article it talks about, you know, like the guys will get by with good enough, and then they get out there and they like take that CEO job, and they're not qualified on paper, but they do the fake it till you make it. And I've really seen that in guide world. And really, I guess the thing, my strategies are that like, I surround myself with other team player, both men and women. So I have had amazing men in the field colleagues too, that like are all about leaving space for you and promoting you, and really giving you that backbone strength, which is really helpful. And then women to collaborate with on those subjects, or just even to vent to. Like I need to process by speaking out loud. So if I'm like, I got offered a heli ski job this year in Valdez, and I just like instantly panicked and called Melis and was like, I'm not good enough for that. Like, I don't have that skill. I'm not a good enough skier. I don't have the skills. And she was like, what are you talking about? And so sometimes it's just like, you have to have this, I think of it as like a bench to go to of your team of angels that you can like pick up on speed dial to talk you off that ledge. And I just know myself well enough to know that like, I just need that little shove to be like, okay, you're right. Like, I can do this. I do have the skills. Even if I'm scared or whatever it may be. So that's kind of how I've strategized around it, is like making that really, really deep bench of go-to people, both men and women, who I know can really be the angel on my shoulder when the devil is getting the best of me and getting in my head. And I just speak it out loud, because fear doesn't have power if you give it voice. You know, it just dissipates, it goes away, you know. So so that's just my way of working with it.
On the same note, both Melis and Brooke covered it, talking about women being really hard on themselves. And I think that plays into part, like, you don't get opportunities you don't apply for. And I know women just being inherently hard on themselves. I haven't gotten over the imposter syndrome, but I hear so many of my friends or peers not reaching out for positions that they don't feel qualified for, and then seeing counterparts with less qualifications applying for the position. So I think there's less women applying for positions in fields or reaching out for opportunities. So I think just supporting your peers, supporting women to apply for opportunities, to reach out to mentors, has been something that I support, because I see it. I mean, today I taught an Avalanche class, and every single female in my introductory Avalanche class had used their beacon before. It was nobody's first time. When I guided with Sara, the women weren't required to have Avalanche courses, and every single one did. So women have these qualifications, often overqualified. So like pushing your peers, pushing other women to reach out for opportunities they may feel underqualified for, because chances are they're probably right there.
That is such a great point. And I think kind of what a lot of you are speaking to is like that, for however good we are at speaking down to ourselves, we're actually usually pretty great at empowering our friends and encouraging our friends. And so if you've like surrounded yourself with that, you know, if you have that bench of people who are willing to say like, you got this, like, are you kidding me? You're the most qualified person here. That is really like that antidote, right? To kind of counter both those messages of like, you have to work twice as hard. You know, I think we all got those messages somewhere along the way, and then we believed it, like, oh, we have to work twice as hard, and I haven't worked quite twice as hard, so I shouldn't even apply, right? So yeah, really flipping that on its head. So Nikki, you mentioned mentorship. And I know, because I asked you all 26 questions before we came here tonight, that you all have had great mentors, males and females, people really kind of in your workplace, and then folks kind of on the periphery. And so I'd love if you share any, you know, sort of, you know, tips about finding a great mentor, but I think also for folks here tonight who are maybe looking for mentors, like what are some great ways that folks have approached you in the past that was particularly compelling or really made you want to kind of drop everything and offer up the support to them?
So what I reached out to Sara about was I felt like I had a lot of I've had a lot of really great mentors. I've been really fortunate to have mentors. I had a lot of people who kind of like pushed me in the snow science path when I was in Bozeman, but what I had a really hard time finding was female mentors. All the male mentors I had come kind of naturally, and I had never had like a female mentor come more organically. I felt like I had to actively seek out female mentors, which is like why I was so excited to come up to the Chugach. It was the first time that I felt like I actually had female mentors. So that's something that I personally have felt in the field is it has had to be a more active part on my behalf to find female mentors. It hasn't been as organic of a situation. So I don't know if somebody wants to talk about finding those mentees.
I can talk about finding mentees. I have a couple of them. One thing that I think is really important when I'm looking for a mentee is seeing someone that's put in at least like a little bit of work, like what Nikki was saying with finding like, all the women who showed up to your clinic knew how to use their beacons. And I think that a lot of people look at like the Avalanche world as this like really like idealistic job, which it can be sometimes, which is awesome. But at least seeing someone who wants to get into it and has maybe like taken their level 1 or level 2 or is working towards their prereqs for their pro 1, and then building off that with them, and then it kind of evens out your time commitment with them.
I really like that point you make, Betsy, because it really implies like that it's mentorship where we're like walking along the path together. You're just like a couple steps behind me, as opposed to like I have to show you where the path is located and teach you how to walk, and right. And that might be too big of an ask, and also might not show that you have kind of the prereqs to like really step into that, and do the walking yourself when the time is right. Liz, did you want to chime in as well?
Yeah, I have this like love-hate relationship with mentors and mentorship. And I think maybe I've been trying to figure out like where the like animus comes from. And I think that some of it is to what Betsy talks about or sorry, maybe that's Nikki, of like having a harder time finding like this person has like the job I want or where I think I'm going, and I'm gonna like match up with that person and we're gonna like work together for a bit. And I feel like those are hard to find because again, there are fewer women in this industry, but maybe also like as we sort of change, like this idea of like the tradesperson, like master apprentice sort of ideation of mentorship is one way. And maybe again, like as we get back to this plateau where we're having a huge dance party, like what mentorship looks like is actually evolves too. So I've come to realize like, oh, I have this like committee of mentors, and they're actually just other women who are like sort of in my path, and some of them are in this field, some of them are in slightly adjacent. I have like a couple of like, I call them support groups, and it ended up being people who kind of, to Brooke's point of like, that would call me or I would call them. It was especially after like really challenging certification courses that had some like really infuriating kind of demeaning moment that would happen on it. And I was like everybody's sounding board. And so we all started coming together and kind of talking about this. And then it's like, you're not necessarily getting that master apprentice relationship from one person, but you have that community that both gives you the ideas and again, like holds you up, like is like the wing, it's more like wingmen than it are wing women, like the person who's like, no, go ask, go do it, go try it, that can like hold you up and sort of again shining that light on like the really amazing things that you have to bring fruit, that the little devil on your shoulder is like, you don't have this. And so I've been trying to like rethink how I describe mentorship, but then also like how I set that up for others. And so I also have been thinking about it not always being this lifelong or this long journey that sometimes it's bounded, because mentorship, the way that we're putting it out there, like on a mentor, is kind of a lot. It's like an unbounded, like long-term relationship that you're like not sure you want to get into. And so like starting out with a bounded thing, I think can be really valuable. Like I specifically am working on my Pro 1 prerequisites, or I'm working on pulling all together the stuff together for Pro 2. And you have kind of a bounded task to target with that person. And then you can see like, they can say, great. And then they can like push you out the nest and send you along the way, or maybe they connect you to another person. So again, thinking of it, because again, my solutions are always nonlinear. Like thinking of it as like pulling from different people, and it doesn't have to be that Padawan type experience.
Can I add to that too a little bit? I actually do a really similar thing with that. I call them my friendtors though. And they're like not necessarily the hierarchy, but they're like this group of women like in the Tetons who live near me that we all like try to get out as much as we can. And like I learned so much from these women, and like, you know, they're not necessarily more or less qualified than me. We're all kind of at the same level professionally, and we have the same goals. And it's just super awesome to be able to work with all these women. And like I learned so much from them. And yeah, it's not like going out and finding like an IFMGA guy to be my mentor. It's so much easier to just find someone on my level.
I just got a text came in that somebody said, "You're my friendtor." I really love that word. I feel that's going to really catch on. Thank you, Betsy. That's great.
Well, something else I was thinking about is, you know, speaking out when you see like an injustice, and it happens all the time where incredibly qualified woman is working, you know, well below her ability and stance. And we had mentioned earlier, but that person needs an advocate, and that might eventually, you know, be in a mentorship role. But I've seen, you know, women in these never-ending cycles of internships because they don't feel like they have enough experience, and it's like somebody needs to leverage them out of that cycle and let them know that, you know, their skills are worthy of, you know, a real salary and a profession and responsibility, and that needs to be matched. And then when you see a friend serve an injustice, and probably as women, you encounter this quite frequently, they get passed over for a job or a promotion, is to really be there for them. So it's certainly those hard skills, and you know, helping somebody with the things that they need to do to get ready for a training, but also knowing that there are these other ways to step in. You know, I have friends that are getting ready for an AMGA exam, and what they want to do is they want the course before the course starts, right? And they're going to a course to learn. They're not going there to get a stamp of approval from their instructor. And so sometimes, you know, being a good mentor is like, no, show up and learn like the rest of them. You know, you shouldn't have to have this course twice, and just kind of helping create healthy limits for people that are emerging in the career to make sure that they're progressing at a good tempo.
I really just want to add, because that last sentence, Melis, of like the progressing at a good tempo, I think the other thing I see in the younger generations is like, it is cool right now, women who are, you know, going through these programs in college. I do feel like they have way more women to look up to in the field, although less than we would like, right? But there's like this sense, and I fall victim to this too, of like, you do an outdoor studies program and you get certified, you get your woofer, and you get your, you know, you just like tick down like all your little check boxes, but what you're lacking is that just experience and time. And so just advocating for that patience too, and that like the trips with friends can give you experience. It doesn't always have to be a job or an internship or like banging out this like douche. It's like, be organic as well with the process, because that's where some of the magic will happen, you know. And then I try to, you know, in seeing people coming out like that, I'm trying to like mentor them in that way too, of like, Sometimes it's okay if you wanted to come to Alaska to like work as a housekeeper at a lodge, even if that's not your dream job, because it might, get you some other experiences, introduce you to people or whatever. It doesn't always have to be like this, that is kind of a masculine approach or masculine world of like certs, courses. And I've kind of like lived in this in between of like, oh, I should pursue all this because that will give me relevance or like a way to like hold up the badge that says I belong. But then there's all these other ways that don't have a pin or a badge where you belong wholeheartedly. So that all paths aren't created equal, but they all have value.
And Brooke, your point is so valid too, that like we hold up that badge and we still feel like an imposter, right? So like you have this idea that you'll like get there and you'll be like, cool, now I'll feel good again, or I'll feel good finally. And then it doesn't happen. So then what, right? And that's where it's like, yeah, actually maybe that wasn't the target. Liz, did you want to chime in too?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a weird double bind, right? It's like, especially our industry's double bind where, we've been talking about Kamala Harris and or Hillary Clinton and all the women in this time period, and just the like insane double standard that they're held to. And that happens in this industry too, I think, where you can get really caught up and buy into that narrative of like, I need to prove that I belong here. And so I need the certs and I need to do it quickly so I can get that experience with that certification. And that it leads to burnout, right? It's that where you're just chasing the thing and then you get it. And it's like, it didn't give me the thing that I wanted because people are still going to disrespect me because haters are going to hate, right? And so you really have to like show up. It goes back to that, like you need to bring your light forward. I sound really, really new agey today, but it is all about like, this is why I do this. And this is why I love this. And so, yeah, maybe it is like being a housekeeper for a season because you get to ski every single day. And then that's like the thing that, I worked as a lift op and Telluride, which was like the most amazing and most demeaning thing I've ever done in my life. So I grew up in Nebraska and they put your hometown on your thing. And every day I was like, if one more person was like, but they don't have mountains like this in Nebraska, and it was just like, I'm obviously an idiot because I'm working lifts. And I'm like, no, I just want to ski. And that's like where I learned to like ski for real. Like everything up until that point had been touristy skiing. And that was what I was like, I'm going to suck this up so that I can, because I ski every day. And that's like part of your path. And that's like an okay, like it didn't lead to a cert, but it was like some of the most valuable and like the most fun I've like had as an adult. And so I think that that's like, give yourself the space to like have that too. Because otherwise then you're just like a collection of certifications that's going to take you a long time and a lot of money to get. And then you're kind of like, I hate this and I hate all the people around me. So yeah, you got to do it. You do have to do it for the love. And you do have to know that, again, like you have value and something to contribute as a human being, like regardless of the pins and letters that you have after your name. But it's hard. You're never going to really feel that way. So like, hold yourself up and you're like, I believe this. I believe this.
This is great. Anybody else want to chime in, or we're going to? Okay, so thank you all for your wisdom so far. So I think everybody, one of the other things other than mentorship that's so ubiquitous is struggle. So I'd love to hear kind of like, a struggle you had, but I think more important is like, what did the people on the bench or the wingmen or whomever like say to you in that moment? Or what did you learn through that? We have like 100 people here ready and listening. Like, what's the advice? What's the lesson learned? No pressure to like change our lives forever, but who wants to start? You're all like waiting, and then you're like, what she said, that was the greatest advice I got. It was right then.
I can start. When I started teaching Avi courses, I worked for Jacksonville Mountain Guides, which is based out of, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And I remember when I started working, I had this incredible mentor, Eric Engel, who I think is now like the head pro trainer for the AAA or something like that. And I was like so excited to learn from her. And we were the only 2 women at the company working the winter program at the time. And then my second year, when I like finally got my ARI certs done and was done shadowing, she left. And I spent a year as the new instructor and the only female. And like I felt kind of lost. I remember partway through the season, the winter director asked me about it. And we had a really long talk. And I was just like, yeah, like there aren't a lot of, like there are no women. I go to the morning meetings and everyone's throwing out and I don't really feel like I fit in the culture. And the next year he hired 5 women, which was like pretty amazing. And I think from that experience, I just learned like speaking up for what you need, and asserting yourself and just, not being afraid to stir the pot a little bit, especially if something seems wrong. So yeah, that's my story.
I love it. Dream big.
Something I think about is a biggest challenge is when, in my mountaineering career, I started guiding groups of men, and I would be, one of a team of, sometimes as many 13 men on an expedition for 30 days. And you can have a lot of skill and competency, but there's also the way that you gain trust in a really uneven group like that has to do a lot with your leadership and communication style. And you think of certain communication styles and leadership styles being like inherently female and certain ones being inherently male. And it took me a long time to get brave enough to try to incorporate things that are kind of more conceptualized as male, like very direct communication style, or letting somebody fail without giving them too much advice or nurturing and guidance, or I think of all these other inherently female things as being positive, but they don't always resonate, and sometimes they discredit you in a group that's very uneven. And so now I think about it in the same way that I think about, pushing myself in the outdoors, like when you're leading rock climbing or choosing, a challenging slope in the backcountry to navigate, you feel a little on edge, like your heart rate gets up. It's a little hard. You're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And to succeed in an outdoor career in a leadership role, you actually have to do that to some extent with your communication and your leadership. And it feels like the first couple of times that you do that you're not being true to yourself, or you're pretending to be something that you're not. But it is just expanding your toolbox, and ultimately, that won't fundamentally change you, but there's a tool you would need for a certain situation. And I found that that's really helped me.
Yeah, Melissa, I think that's so valuable to, I've been talking a lot with folks about code switching, and just, so I think about it in terms of, my mother's Korean. I lived in Korea for a while, and there was definitely like a way I sort of was with my Korean side of my family and my coworkers that was like completely different from who I was when I, was generally speaking in English. And that wasn't like a different me. It was just sort of like picking and choosing where I'm going to like push against the system. And I think that's the same way here. It's like really easy to get caught up in sort of like, well, the third wave feminist in me believes I should just be able to show up in this room and say this. But there is like the guide in me recognizes like, it's not about me, it is about my client. And so in this moment, I do need to like employ all the tools that I have. And so you can look at it as like your superpower in a lot of ways as a woman, that you get to control how you show up. And then, but that's also great power. And then also like being able to ask for what you need. So I've seen like a lot of great guides on female guides on Rainier that are, you know, like preface halfway through the trip of like, okay, when we're on the upper mountain, I have this other side of me that's gonna like bust the shit out of you. And it's not that I don't like you, and it's not like nice so-and-so went away. It's just that like things are for real up here. And you, because I have long hair and I'm smaller than you, you might interpret that as I'm being an XYZ, but I'm just trying to keep us safe. And then we come back down and we're under 10,000 feet and it's all like fun and games and ponytails and tutus again. And, you know, they just like put that out there, and that's like authentic to who they are. So it's about like finding that, being authentic to yourself and using that style. You know, I call that a guiding skill, but I think it's also like a really good, it becomes like an effective tool to advocate for yourself and your needs. Cause then you can show up, as Betsy said, and just like be honest with your boss and be like, yeah, it's lonely here. And they're like, oh, because they're not a bad person. They don't have to think about it. That's what privilege is, right? And so then they're like, I should fix that. Thanks for pointing that out. So sometimes it's just like us like practicing being really honest with ourselves and others. And then that's how we enlist others to like be the change for us as well.
I want to just add in that one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from a mentor was like seeing people as good but uninformed, or good but inexperienced, or good but exhausted. And I think when we see people as bad, we tend to like refuse to engage, right? We like push away or we like disregard them. And if we see them as like all good, we see like no role that we might have, right? But Betsy, I think of like your boss was like good but unaware. And then you made your boss aware, and then your boss was able to do something different. And so feeling as if we can engage with somebody who is good but, right, like leaves this space. I'm going to add into this conversation one of the questions from our Q&A, because I think it's like a little related. And Nikki and Brooke, if you guys want to chime in about not related to the question I'm adding, feel free. But so what has been the most productive response you've given when you've been undermined or felt belittled by male coworkers, supervisors, or clients? So yeah, Brooke's like, I don't know.
I think of really, really awesome responses a day later.
Yeah, that's
I get so I've joked quite often. So like, you know, I think Melis has been one of my mentors in like modeling that direct communication, and where I've struggled with is that that my style of guiding is very what would be typified as feminine, you know, like I am super touchy feely, let's put on some glitter and talk about it. And that's been hard to like own in a man's world and feel like that has value, and still like be like, no, I get, like if people start drowning, yeah, I'm gonna start yelling and you'll see the direct side of me for sure. But as long as there's no immediate danger, then I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna listen to you talk about the grief of your son who you lost, you know, or whatever it is. It's like I really do think of guiding as like a midwifing somebody's experience, and that has caused me insecurity in like the world of like male colleagues before, and now I'm old enough that maybe I ran out of F's to give in with the male colleagues. But then with male clients, like I feel like one of my adult goals in life, I've joked that I just I think that what I struggle with, this like thing that maybe lots of humans have, is that for some odd reason I want everybody to like me. Who knew? And including like some jackass with tons of money who already has a wife and is like hitting on me at this heli ski lodge and thinks that I'm part of the program, you know, and that should be like shut down, like douche, you know, like you have the perfect response, you just shut them down. And I'm always like, no, thank you. And then I go away and I'm like, oh God, why wasn't I like this or that, or say this like snazzy thing and really like show him? And what I realize, and I start to beat myself up, is I'm doing the next woman a disservice because I didn't say anything appropriate. So I listened to this awesome podcast called Juicy Bits, put on by the women who run Coalition Snow out of Tahoe. And they interviewed a bunch of different female guides. And this one woman was asked this question about you know, what she does with male clients. And she said, you know, you have to have a canned response ready. She's like, my canned response is, that was inappropriate. That didn't make me feel good. And this is why. And then it's like, it's professional. It calls them on it right away. It like moves the conversation forward. And I thought, oh my God, that's brilliant. Like, I just need a canned response. You need something in your holster at your side that you're not taken off guard. Like, I can't believe that this client is hitting on me right now. Like, that's so, and then you're just like flustered and like, I don't know how to deal with that. Instead, you're like, that was inappropriate. And you wouldn't ask that of a male guide. And so, you know, I'm here to get you through this experience and have you have the best ski day of your life. But, you know, I'm not here to be eye candy for you or whatever it is. You don't have to come up with like the super witty, snappy thing. It's just like, that was inappropriate. You would never say that to a male guide. So you should ask yourself that right now. And then moving on, we're going to ski this pitch. Pay attention. I'm working on that.
Yeah,
Nikki, jump in.
I agree with what Brooke said. It's so hard. I've dealt with a lot of blatant sexism, especially in guiding. You see it a lot. I think having a canned response is the easiest. And also I found most of the sexism I've experienced has come from clients and less from peers, and having a conversation with my male peer guides and letting them know is, I think, really important, because I've had like responded with my canned response, like that is inappropriate. And then had male peers, like if they're handed all of the tips or more money than me, in front of the clients, they'll hand the tips back to me and be like, I think you gave the money to the wrong person. You know, just handling, like having your male peers understand what you go for, and not ignoring the situation, but not calling, like just bringing it to light and recognizing that that the situation was handled poorly, I think can be really helpful in getting male peers on board to understand what we go through.
Yeah, I love that. Like, seek out the allies, right? Like, where's your ally in the room? Cool. I'm gonna try to give us another question. There's a lot of really great ones. I feel like we're not gonna get to them all. So there's kind of two that are similar a little bit. So first, all of you are amazing. I agree. Any tips for someone who doesn't feel like she belongs or isn't sure if she's ready to take a Pro 1? And then a similar related question is like, I feel like I should step into teaching. How do I make that step? And so I feel like there's sort of this question of like, how do you like level up, right? Or when do you know when to level up? Does anybody want to field that?
I'd say, going back to Melissa's study that she referenced from New York Times, is that, you know, a Pro 1 is a course, you know, and so it's not like you have to learn it all and take the course before the course. It's like, it's a course. It's set out, you know, 5 days of learning and like active mentoring, and there's lots you can do to prepare for that. So I would say just sign up and get, you know, get the swag and the Snow and Weather Avalanche Guidelines book and read it like it's your Bible, and start to practice rescue. And, you know, you can look up on the AAA website about what all the requirements are for that course. And then start to, like, you know, be prepared, but you don't have to learn everything ahead of time. Like, go in, you know, knowing your stuff. But I think that if you're even considering taking a Pro 1, then just sign up. Like, that means you're ready. Like, and then the same with teaching. I would say this exact same thing is like, my pat answer when people tried to get me to be a teacher for Avalanche School was like, no way. Like, I was terrified of not knowing the answer when students asked me. And you know what I found out is, like, a lot of times I didn't know the answer, but I learned along with them, and it was fine. Like, I didn't melt and disintegrate and get shunned from the Avalanche community forever. And in fact, like, I actually found out that I knew way more than I thought I did, you know, which was really fun. And that I had a lot to offer, and that was really rewarding. So, if you're just wondering when to level up, I'd say just do it. Like that's, I think the best advice that I've ever gotten with struggle is like when I've been like, I don't know if I should, and people are like, you don't know what temperature the water is going to be until you jump in. So, and I bet you're going to succeed wildly if it's even like crossing your horizon, that it's a question for you. So go for it.
I love that. Like if you're asking if you're ready, you're probably ready. Yeah. So one more question. And then the question disappeared. Oh, so I see, Alice, you're great. You're answering in the Q&A. That's awesome. So any moms in the group want to talk about the balance of motherhood and being a professional and male dominated? Anybody want to speak to Liz is like, no.
I can hit on something I didn't hit in the chat, because I've had the unusual experience of doing like expedition guiding on top of being a mom. So my daughter's now 9 years old, and it's only within the last 12 months that I haven't spent, a good portion of the year away from her. When I say a good portion, like 100 days, like a third of the year. My guiding contracts were, anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks at a time. And so I had to match that, like I said in the chat, with a deep well of support from a variety of sources. But luckily also I had a daughter that accommodated it. I can see, that might not have been the case. Like you're always going to make decisions family first. But what I can say from balancing that for so many years is it's hard in any relationships then to, when you come back for these bursts of periods, to deal with normal life stuff. You need to work on something in your relationship. Are you going to pick that 1 week that you're at home to work on it? Or are you going to glaze over it and say everything's okay? And things can build over time. And if you kind of pursue that, you probably need a big break to play catch up, or else you're not really doing the caretaking that any healthy relationship would need. So it's very possible. The other thing I can say as a mom is I know lots of moms that haven't spent a night or more away from their children. And when they do, it makes them anxious. And as somebody that's spent like way more than that, I feel like it takes like 3 days to shake the whole thing off, to not be thinking about the thing that's going to go bad in the fridge, or you didn't tell somebody about the music class. Like that weighs on you, and it takes some depth and some period of time away to actually reconnect with your fellow guides and professionals in a way that doesn't have all the distractions of somebody, with a lot of family responsibility. And so all I can say is from experience, have faith in that. Actually, those longer stints are actually a little bit, I would say almost more healthy than that just occasional treat away. You don't really get that full escape to be able to pursue this other part of yourself that makes you a whole being.
That was a great answer, Alice. Thank you. Yeah, Liz, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think mine is it. What do I? I think that everyone, like what I've realized, I'm kind of was like an ambivalent or reluctant mother, and so it's different. And I think here in the Northwest, I've had a lot of examples of guide mothers that set the bar really high, and that was a really hard standard to sort of live up to. And you have this like, oh, it's not going to slow me down, and it really did. I dealt with a lot of like, again, because I was like ambivalently went into it, I feel like I got really sandbagged about what happens to your body after birth, and I had a lot of those things going on. It just took a lot of time to recover. I'm actually still like dealing with some of those things, and that's like something that happens to people. Like I've always really appreciated Beth Rodden for like how profoundly like honest she is about, partly because I'm like, oh, that does happen to other people. That happened to a pro athlete. That's a really big deal. But I think to Melissa's point, like you find ways, like whether that is your partner that can help you make that happen, or family or friends, but you do need to, like, you have to like it, lean in more to like advocating for yourself and for your family and for what you need. And but it brings like a real clarity around like what it is that you want to do, because you choose, you're like, all right, well, this 60-day expedition is really important. It's part of who I am, and I'm not changing that for my child. And like we fit within that, or maybe it's like that's not what's gonna happen right now, and I put that on the shelf and it comes out later, because kids change too. So I was gone a lot when she was young, and I remember like I pumped and dumped on a lot of shorter expeditions, but I was like, I'm committed to nursing. So I'm like in the Pasayten, and I'm still like trying to keep my milk up, and then just like flinging milk out to the, to the wilderness. And like, that's a thing. And like, that was what I did, you know, to be the mom that I wanted to be and still be a NOLS instructor. And so I think, I don't know, in there I'm saying like, it's doable, and find, again, this goes back to that mentorship thing of find people who support you in doing that and support you in like doing what's important to you. And if that's family, then that's family. And if it's family and a job and figuring that out, like find people who help you make that happen, and don't feel compelled to like meet the bar set by a lot of really amazing IFMGA guides who have children, but like that's one path. And if that happens, that's great. And then other people who like haven't run over 2 miles since she had a child is like another path, and that happens as well. And it'll all, PT is wonderful, it'll all get fixed. So
Liz, that's really wonderful. I appreciate you sharing your honesty, and Melis sharing yours as well. So we've reached the end of our time together this evening. I think one of the things, you know, just to kind of bring it all back around, I feel real grateful that we're on this plateau instead of this like knife edge ridge, you know, sort of situation, because like we need a lot of room, because we all need our wingmen, and we all need our people on the bench, and our angels, and our friends, and our friendtors. Love that. And like that feels really great. So I want to thank each one of the panelists for digging in with us tonight and helping everybody, you know, maybe feel a little more like they have a space at the top. And to those of you we didn't get time for your questions, I apologize. And for those of you who don't know, this is part of a series, so we'll be doing these panels for all different professions. Next week is the snow science, so if you are interested in that or know anybody who is, share that. And I'm really grateful for everybody showing up and being with us tonight. Yeah. Any last words from any of the panelists? Anything you didn't get to say that you feel compelled to say? All right, well, thank you all so much, and have a great evening, or a good evening, or like a less great evening, however it goes for you. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much.